Happy Monday. We're back with another episode of Go FUD Yourself.
Another one?
Good friend Kiara. What's up?
Another episode?
How was your end of the week without me? Like a lot of fun or really boring and sad?
It was so boring and sad. Nobody made any inappropriate jokes.
Wouldn't be a good day at the office if there wasn't any offside jokes. Good thing we don't have an HR department. All right. So it was Thanksgiving long weekend in the United States. So a lot of people were off, but that doesn't mean that the news stopped happening. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff to cover from the weekend and from my absence at the end of last week. What are we talking about today?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to talk about GameFi a little bit. I've been moving more into the GameFi realm. So this popped up on my feed, and I'm pretty excited about what Square Enix is doing. And then we're going to talk about some Cosmos Atom changes, which I think is a big deal because although these proposals did come to vote, they were quite close. And so I'm interested to talk about the sentiment there. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to move more into hacks. So we've got, a wallet draining service. We're going to talk about HTX again and Justin Sun again. And we're also going to move down and just finish talking about CZ and Do Kwon. I feel like they're going to be in the news until I'm dead. So we're going to talk about them every episode, every day for the rest of our lives.
I hope they're not in the news till you're dead, because that means one of two things. They're in the news for like a long time, or you die early. And that sucks too. So let's hope neither of those things actually.
What's like the nicest thing you've ever said to me?
Well, you got to mix up some of the criticism with a little bit of compliments. Otherwise, it's
so because it's a weekend roundup and we had that super long weekend. I feel like there's a lot of different topics. Usually we try to be a little more thematic, but this is a little bit more of like a bing bong bang. You missed a lot, so
we will go through all of it. We got you covered. All right, let's freaking go.
Do it. Exactly.
That's what I feel like. I feel like I'm the drummer in that particular song.
Nailed it. Okay, we're going to talk about Square Enix. So we've talked about this a little bit before because Square Enix created Final Fantasy. And so when they announced that they were going to be exploring Web3, I was pretty stoked about that. I brought some of that news up a couple of times, but it was really, really rumor mongering. But now they have actually announced that they are releasing an NFT project. And so it's supposed to combine traditional gaming with NFTs on ETH and on Polygon, which is pretty cool. I feel like it's going to be a big deal because people already love Square Enix and they have such a wild following due to Final Fantasy, but also some of the other games that they've come up with. So their new game is called Symbiogenesis. And I guess that already sort of is a game, but now there's going to be an element of it where you can buy a relic, and that relic is an NFT. And so owning that relic out of game will have some value, and then owning it in game will also have gameplay value. So I don't know. I like seeing NFTs have some utility, but I like GameFi. I feel like it's a really easy group of people to onboard to Web3 as gamers.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a bit of a double-edged sword because GameFi was essentially dead this bear market. Anyways, so it was one of those things that people were really struggling, like trying to understand how any economics were gonna matter with respect to NFTs and so on. And as a consequence of that, a lot of creators and participants and gamers were like, forget this shit. Like, we got to buy stuff in a wildly volatile asset. And when we sell things, they fluctuate wildly. It's almost not worth it, is what they were thinking during a down market. But now when things are going back up, there's a lot more excitement around these kind of culture, art, gaming-esque type things again. I think we'll probably see another round of onboarding and excitement. It's funny. I was talking about Final Fantasy just the other day. I'm not a gamer. Oddly, I'm not a gamer at all. The first game I've played in my adult life, I started a couple months ago. And then the last video game that I can remember was Final Fantasy VII when I was pretty young.
You're really not a gamer. Okay.
I'm really not a gamer. Anyways, but I was thinking that Final Fantasy was way ahead of its time. I feel like the the role-playing aspects of Final Fantasy was pretty interesting. It was like the beginning of RPGs where it became like multiplayer and kind of one of those never-ending type things. Final Fantasy wasn't that, but it was damn close early on. So this is pretty cool. It's a very well-established, well-known brand doing something similar. I mean, this is when I think of like NFT utility, these are the types of things that I think of. This is actually what NFT technologies is really good for. One of the things that it's really good for. JPEGs, they exist, but that was really, in my opinion, the tulip phase of NFTs, where it's just like pure speculation, hype, excitement, rarity, whatever. People are just trying to figure it out. Now, I suspect that we're going to see a lot more of this meaningful value creation type
Absolutely.
projects. But I mean, the buy pressure for this, the royalties, the resale revenue, like they can make pretty good cash off something like this. I look at some of the games that exist currently, and in particular, the one that I occasionally play. I mean, you get a lot of people spending a pile of money on there, and like a lot of money, like multiple tens of thousands of dollars on their accounts. And so obviously there's definitely a market for these things. And, you know, if you have hard to find or hard to get pieces or whatever, there's also rental markets for this stuff too. Which
so that's
is
what I was going to say. So I was just looking a little bit deeper into this game, just live, because I didn't do any due diligence beforehand. And you'll also be able to have character NFTs, but you'll be able to create character NFT replicas that expire.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like they're already thinking about that rental market and how individuals will make that money, but also how they'll make that money from the NFT, which is interesting. It also looks like a pretty complex game. It's only 6 chapters, so you'd be able to finish it pretty quickly and like sell your built character and also sell the world that they have been built in. But this NFT replicas component is pretty interesting. It would allow you to keep a replica of your NFT or your character at a certain stage, but it would also allow you to mint a number of them so that you could sell them.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the most obvious innovative advantages of NFTs versus any other form of technology is you can, in fact, take them back. Like you can structure that in programmatically so that either when the rental period is up, it's returned, or it's renewed and another rental fee is paid again in advance. And so there's some really cool stuff you can do. There's a lot less concern about, you know, the repos that would have to happen in those environments and different things when people are using these assets. But I think there's a ton of potential here. It's just a function of trying to figure out how to get rid of a lot of the kind of unnecessary volatility and hype and speculation associated with JPEGs, and really just focus on building an economy around these in-game assets. But I think honestly, like the way that these games have evolved, they lend themselves so incredibly well to this. I was also looking at another game called Baldur's Gate. That's another one that I think would be kind of cool for this type of move into Web3, because it's, again, RPG. It's kind of like a card game, sort of like Dungeons and Dragons, I guess. But there's some RPG aspects, and I don't know. Anyways, there's some really cool games I think that could lend themselves nicely. I think where people are kind of getting confused with respect to Web3 gaming, in that it's not like you're going to put the game engine on chain. Like you're not going to have the entire game be on chain. Like that, it's not currently feasible with storage requirements and a million other things. But so everybody was, for some reason, expecting all of these like AAA games to launch the whole game on the blockchain. Well, that's not happening. It's not.
To what end, right?
Sorry?
To what end?
Yeah, like it's not happening anytime soon. It will, maybe eventually, once the technology catches up, but we're not even remotely close to what it would need to be. So yeah, I don't know. And then what we saw was a lot of, you know, opportunistic type projects, you know, artists taking advantage of their art reputation or different things and building these PFP projects. And then we had some gaming that came out that was like really crappy gimmicky games and all this other crap. And people, I think, were jaded then. They thought that Web3 gaming was failing. There was no games built entirely on chain. AAA studios hadn't delivered anything yet. That's because it takes 5 years to build a game. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's a lot of conflation here that's happening, I think, with respect to GameFi and gaming, but it's definitely a space that I'm interested in for this cycle. So
Okay, hold on. Let's be funny about this for 1 sec, okay?
Okay.
Before we move on. Otherwise, we'll talk about GameFi the whole time because I've been also interested in GameFi lately. Square Enix is now doing things that those who've been involved in GameFi for some time have also been trying to do. So one of those elements is allow for a Web 2 game where you don't actually have to purchase an NFT, where you don't actually have to operate on Web 3, but you get to play an online digital game. You get to be part of a community. And then eventually you'll probably want to have an in-game purchase, and you'll be able to move through the game faster if you have that in-game purchase. So it's a great way to onboard new users to Web 3. But just like how we don't love centralized exchanges and how we don't love regulation and all that kind of stuff in DeFi, although GameFi individuals seem pretty happy about Square Enix moving into this space and what have you, it will deflate their own personal projects, I think, because this is a big company that has a fantastic game. They've been working on it for 5 years. We already know the quality of the game is going to be what it is. They already have a following, and there's no reason that those who were interested in Web3 gaming or GameFi would stick with the projects that they're with now and not go play this game. Everyone's going to go play Symbiogenesis, even if it's only for 6 weeks to get through the 6 chapters. I think that it does concern me that we're seeing the same issue as we talk about with BlackRock ETFs. It's like the big player is coming in, and now what happens to all the small players?
Unfortunately, that's almost always going to be the case when it comes to technology, right?
No,
and I don't like it either. Obviously, I complain about it all the time with respect to finance and so on. But I mean, in particular, gaming and some of these, like, there's a big investment that goes into building a game. Like, many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars go into building one game. So, anyways, the time horizon is long. There's a lot of stuff they have to do. I think generally they've got. Well, we'll have to see. I'm definitely interested in this. I don't think that there's any other way around this because it's so expensive to develop these games. We're not going to see any AAA games come out of nowhere. We saw Shrapnel on Avalanche, which is really cool, but they've been building that for over 3 years. We were seed investors, and they were all like high-level ex AAA studio people, and like they still struggle to get the game out on VC funding alone in Web3. So, I mean, we've definitely got a hill to climb here, but all in all, I think for the space, it's generally a good sign. I mean, just to round this out quickly, sorry to interrupt you, to round this out, since we're on the same topic still, if you check out Immutable is building an infrastructure layer specifically for this, to enable GameFi, to enable kind of these tangential in-game assets for gaming studios and games that aren't all in Web3. So there's some really cool stuff, and there's some second order projects being built on Immutable too that are pretty cool. I don't know if are we talking about that today?
No.
Oh, anyways, so just worth checking out if you're
totally. I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple of NFT GameFi projects. So if you are waiting for Square Enix to launch Symbiogenesis and you're like, how am I actually going to use NFTs? Xborg is pretty cool. Salty Sharks is pretty cool. We have Aradina, Crazy Ants, NFT Battle Miners, and Oldor, and all of them have free-to-play and NFT components. So if you're not sure what that might look like or how that mechanism works, there are lots out there, is what I'm trying to say, before you like go all in on Symbiogenesis.
Yeah, maybe we can get the producers to put some links in the description of the video. So check description underneath the video, and you'll see some sort of links to that stuff if you want.
Okay,
all right.
Let's talk about Cosmos, because this is a pretty big deal. Cosmos has decided that they're going to change how inflation works and how their tokenomics work. This is, I think, a big deal because they did put it to a vote, and they had a narrow majority of 41.1% for the change and 38.5% against the change. And I mean, you can talk about the tokenomics all you want, but I wonder what this does to the community. Like, is this when we end up seeing weird forks and weird offboarding, or are people just going to accept it and move on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this is one of the major issues that we have with the current understanding and design around governance and a few other things. Pure democracy, generally speaking, like voting on everything, has been proven theoretically and in practice to not work that well. I mean, it sounds good in theory, but people's individual motivations vary widely. And you can see that by, I mean, it's really obvious in US politics. Because it's almost exactly 50-50. And so you can see it in it doesn't matter what the issue is, people are going to land on one side or the other because That's just how it works. But this is an important one, because I think what's actually the conflict here is personal motivation and incentives versus long-term, somewhat altruistic, greater good incentives. Now, that's very general, and I'm putting everything into two very broad buckets. Of course,
that's so unlike you.
There's different variations of those buckets, so to speak. But this is just one of those examples, and this is a problem with how we've communicated while we're trying to stay out of the way of regulators. Is by saying,
so there's big names who vote on this, right? Or I guess we also make commentary on this. So let's just review that a little bit.
Let's do that first.
Zero Knowledge Validator supports what's going on, citing that double-digit inflation is unnecessary for security. And meanwhile, All Nodes is opposing, saying that it's going to kill small validators. It's abrupt. It's ill-researched. So that's pretty interesting. But just so you actually know what's happening, basically the Cosmos Hub community has voted to cap atom inflation at 10%. Lately, it's been around 14%, and people expected it to go much higher. But this will change the annualized staking yield adjustment from 19% to 13.4%. And also, this was the highest ever turnout for voting in the Cosmos ecosystem. So this is something that matters to people a lot, and then they were split right down the middle.
Yeah. So Atom has had its fair share of challenges with tokenomics in particular. They had Atom 1, and then they came out with Atom 2, which still hasn't been very successful. I mean, a staking yield of 13.9% is still pretty incredible. You can loop that on lending protocols and get it to like 30 or 35%. That is substantial enough to justify the smart contract risk, generally speaking. So I don't think it's hugely problematic. Of course, it cuts yield for the smaller guys. It cuts yield for the bigger guys too. I don't think it matters whether you're a small or a big validator. It's still percentage basis. Personally, I don't know anything about the research that went into this, but I mean, almost 20% yield is not sustainable at all, for sure. Most other chains, ETH is at 5 or 6%, AVAX is at 7%. Like that's kind of where things seem to settle from a validation perspective. So I mean, this is to me just normal. 14% per year inflation obviously is a huge problem. You have to earn 14% per year yield just to offset the inflation, which obviously people are arguing about. So we've got to figure out, if we're earning 13.9 and there's inflation of 10%, we have to loop it to make it justifiable. So, I mean, anyways, all that to say, this highlights, in my opinion, one of the challenges with yield in on-chain finance currently, because the yield is very direct. There's no multiplier. There's no money multiplier. We can't do fractional reserve or anything. At some point, we might be able to, but currently we can't. And so it's too difficult to squeak out yield to make it worth it. So anyways, coming back to this, we talk a lot about governance and treasuries, and we're not a security, so we're never sharing revenue, but your governance token will be able to vote on and control treasury. And for some reason, people think that means they get the treasury. And in theory, that could actually be true. You could do an airdrop. They could vote to do pretty much anything. But now what you're doing is you're pitting together or against each other two wildly opposing motivations. One individual, the other collective. And I mean, individual motivations are obviously pretty powerful, especially people that feel that they might be disadvantaged. If you look at the very vocal minorities in different oppressed groups, so to speak, I mean, it's... Anyways, I don't want to go down a political rabbit hole.
Are there oppressed groups in Cosmos?
Sorry?
Are there oppressed groups in Cosmos?
No. I could have brought it full circle, but we're going to leave it on that one.
Okay, let's talk about hacks. Let's talk about wallets. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Just to finalize that point, I think this is going to be difficult until the end of time to figure out how to... And you get people voting that way politically, people in certain classes of...
That's why I think it's so interesting that it's like right down the middle. Is it going to cause some sort of Cosmos war? Oh my God, are we going to have a Web3 war?
I don't know. I don't find it hugely problematic, though. I feel like the closer people are, the closer the power balance is, I think it's better because then you get more meaningful debates and things are.
I gotta write an article now called World War Web 3.
What?
World War Web 3
Yeah.
might be a little bit poor taste considering the current.
Considering what's going on right now, yeah.
All right, Inferno Drainer, which is Blumhouse's newest horror movie, has closed, which is really confusing to me. So Inferno Drainer is a crypto wallet draining service, and they've stolen like $70 million, and then they announced on Telegram that they're going to close, which is I don't understand.
So
it's scam as a service.
Yeah,
it's like bullying as a service.
Yeah, it's like kind of like a SaaS product, I guess. So they built. It is kind of. But they built like wallet draining and phishing technology that they essentially white label and let people buy. Good that they're closing down. Like I think hopefully for everybody's sake that was scammed as a consequence of this shit, that they're not outside of regulatory purview just by closing down right now. They may be, who knows? But I mean, obviously the sharks are circling. I wouldn't be doing that dumb shit publicly at all right now. Obviously, regulators are not sleeping on this anymore. So it's kind of ridiculous. I'm sick of this shit. I think we're going to see a lot less of it once regulation becomes more prevalent. And
I can't believe that there was scam as a service that had a Telegram group. First of all, I guess I was out of touch on this because I'm way too notoriously honest and so like I would never think to even look for this. But of course it exists, right? It's just something I never considered personally. But you could just go on their Telegram and hire them, and they would take a 20% commission from the stolen funds. I feel like that's a win-win for both of them, but maybe not for the people that they scam.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just so tired of hearing about all these scams. I think, good riddance.
There's more. Can you imagine doing a competitive analysis for a scam as a service? There's Pink Drainer, there's Angel Drainer, Monkey Drainer closed. What a weird
market. Multiple drainers.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Maybe there's something that we should be looking into there. Maybe these people can be repurposed in some way that's useful. She says from her dystopian reality. And then we get to talk about Huobi, because last week we talked about Justin Sun and how people were losing some faith in all of that. But Huobi claims that they have now fully restored their Bitcoin services after their hacking incident. And Bitcoin, ETH, TRX, USDT are all available to deposit and withdraw on Huobi.
Yay, they're hot.
So there's a few people weirdly on my LinkedIn and not my Twitter who really hate Justin Sun. They akin him to CZ and say that he's like devil incarnate.
He's unfortunately he's found himself on the wrong side of general public sentiment many times, just because he's one of those guys. He's very much like a Do Kwon kind of renegade, kind of forget the rules, fuck all y'all, that's kind of their approach that had been. And I think there was a lot of people that were underestimating the influence of Western regulators globally. And I think a lot of these guys just honestly thought they were invincible. Justin Sun has said a lot less and done a lot less in the last couple of years, which I think is probably pretty smart considering I'm sure Tron is definitely a likely target for enforcement actions at some point, especially given his persona. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad that Justin Sun aside, I'm glad that Huobi or HTX has fixed their wallet issues and everything's getting back to normal. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with Sun. Speaking
of Do Kwon, though.
Well, yeah.
Do you want to jump on that? His extradition?
Yeah. I have almost no time for this guy. But his extradition was approved by Montenegro. I don't think anybody expected that not to happen.
Yeah.
Because Montenegro obviously wants to stay in the good graces of the United States at the moment for a whole host of reasons. So I don't know. This to me is just this should just go quietly into the night. I don't want to hear about Do Kwon anymore. Again, I think a lot of the challenges he just happened to be the person that was there when the first domino fell, in my opinion.
Do you think so? From Tara?
Yes and no, but well, no, like I think he was definitely a part of it. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
Like he contributed to it, but I think there's a lot of people that contributed to it. The problems that we had.
For sure.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's the bear market is not entirely on Do Kwon. Having said that, I think he did a really poor job of representing the space leading into the end of the bull.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as a consequence of that, I think just drew a whole bunch of unnecessary attention, negative attention. And then of course, when the catastrophe happened, like their response to it was just embarrassing, in my opinion.
Okay,
and so
well,
anyways, I hope we never talk about him again, but here we are.
What about CZ? What do you think about CZ right now?
Yeah, so he's trying to leave the US. The US is saying no. I mean,
wait, he was in the US?
Yeah, he had to come to Seattle, I think. He was in Seattle, as far as I understand, to deal with his plea and all that shit. I think that he had to do it in person.
Oh, he surrendered. Wow, I missed that.
Yeah.
Trying to be alive.
And he appeared in court voluntarily. So they say that he's saying, well, I showed up last time voluntarily, so why? And their argument is, yeah, but you live in Dubai. So, I mean, you go home and there's no way we can get you back.
You know, I have to say, though, I didn't expect him to show up. I didn't expect him to surrender and come to the States. So good on him, ethically. Good on him for like living up to taking responsibility for his actions in some way.
Credit where credit's due.
You know?
I mean, he was charged and he showed up. Good. Gotta respect that at least, you know.
I'm impressed. I really didn't anticipate that at all. So
I also think
it's almost the opposite of the Do Kwon, where Do Kwon got arrested carrying fake documents and had to go to Montenegro and serve a 4-month sentence so that he could then be extradited to places he actually is supposed to be living, like South Korea. And meanwhile, CZ has like a full different life in UAE and thought, no, I should probably save Binance and also go to court.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing about CZ relative to Do Kwon is he's a fairly well-known public figure now. Like, I bet you there's a good like third of the world that knows his likeness, which is like that's a lot of people. So I think, I mean, another argument, it's the same argument for Trump. Like, where is Trump going to go?
Yeah.
Like, and not be noticed. Like, he's got a giant plane that has his name on it. Like,
well, being noticed is interesting because technically in the UAE, Do Kwon could have just lived life with people knowing who he was. Like, there's no extradition there, right?
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, that, of course, is true. The Dubai thing, I think, is probably the reason. But I mean, generally speaking, even if he went to Dubai and didn't show up for court, he could never again leave Dubai without being arrested.
Right.
So, like, I mean, that sucks.
This is interesting too. Is I guess they've come to some sort of deal between CZ and U.S. regulators, but nobody is stating what the deal is. So it could include American prison time, even. Kind of interesting.
I suspect that in pleading guilty and agreeing to that extraordinary fine, that the SEC got the win that they wanted and were able to. He resigned. They got him out of control. They got a huge fine. Like, I think they're probably thinking, okay, the public will probably accept it. They could get CZ to agree and not fight them for a bunch of years. I think they're probably both parties are probably seeing this as a win-win. I don't think it is, personally. I think if there was meaningful negligence and fraud and all these other things that have been accused and commingling of customer funds and all of this other stuff, somebody's got to be held responsible for it.
Yep.
And so I don't like it when it feels like people get away with this stuff. But again, you look at what happened at FTX. The only person that meaningfully will ever serve any time for anything that happened there was is SBF. And was it all his fault? No. Like, obviously he was really involved.
He was there doing it. Yeah.
really involved, deeply involved in what's going on. But I mean, Sam and Carolyn and all these other people, like, I mean, they were able to just become state's witness and get away with it. And that to me it's a lot of lawyering, and that's kind of the problem with the legal system, but better than nothing, I guess.
Okay. That's go FUD Yourself. Was it FUDdy? Was it FUDdy enough?
Yeah, it was pretty funny. I'm positive on the Cosmos thing. I think that it was the right move. I think the fact that it was so close and the fact that it was such a good turnout is reassuring.
It's an engaged ecosystem. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, it's reassuring because one of the challenges has been, does anybody care about Cosmos anymore?
Yeah.
And I think this shows that there's a good amount of people that maybe do.
Yeah.
And that actually are caring about kind of the sustainability and future of the protocol, so, or of the blockchain. So I think it's pretty cool. I mean, the Square Enix thing I think is positive, although fuddy in terms of what it may do.
I want to be fuddy about it.
Yeah.
All right.
This Inferno thing was fuddy, kind of fuddy about Do Kwon. Yeah, we're good. We covered all the FUD bases today. Yeah. Quick shout out to Sartora. Formal verification, they're awesome. If you are looking for that type of service, check them out. We're a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, every freaking day. So like, share, subscribe, do all that shit to help us get the word out there to more people. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode. And with that, today I say to you, Kiara, go find yourself.
Go find yourself.
Bye.